The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
So as I mentioned on the regular show today, I was in New York City for the 4th of July break, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later. There is an interesting story out of New York. A woman climbed up to the robes of the Statue of Liberty to protest the separation of migrant families. She was taken into custody after a standoff with police yesterday on the 4th of July. Authorities showed up, tried to talk her down. She refused to leave. For 3 hours, she was crossing the base of the statue, sometimes sitting on the folds of the Statue of Liberty's dress and under the sandal, identified as Therese Patricia Okamu by a law enforcement source familiar with the investigation. She was part of a group of protesters and declared she wouldn't come down until all the children were released, which, of course, was simply not going to happen. And ultimately, 16 officers with one of the most highly trained units in NYPD, the Emergency Service Unit, they do the dangerous rescues. They were able to get her down, and she was taken into custody. I think that there is something poetic about this particular protest. 4th of July, the Statue of Liberty, a sign of American patriotism or whatever. I'm never good at figuring out what's patriotic, but I think by sort of those arbitrary standards of patriotism, the Statue of Liberty is a sign of that, despite being a gift from France, which we've now completely alienated.
Just an openness to immigration, right? That's the symbol.
It does represent that for sure. So I think that there is something poetic about it, but I don't know that I say that I support this, because in the end, someone got themselves arrested.
Yeah, and it's not going to work. I mean, just one person going up to the Statue of Liberty and demanding that ICE release everyone and reunite all the families, that's just not going to happen.
That's fair, but let me ask you this. If it were 100 people doing it, would you feel differently? Like, do you think that it's not a useful protest because it's not enough people? Like, would you feel differently if everybody, if just boat after boat after boat of people going out to the tour of the Statue of Liberty Island did this, that it would make a different level of statement?
There's a bigger chance that it would be successful, but ultimately the police officers, law enforcement don't tend to give in to protests like these. And, you know, we would have like I don't know if it's like a hostage negotiation situation, but certainly there would be negotiations, and eventually those people would need to eat something and would eventually be persuaded to come down, as she did after 3 hours.
Not to mention that the people involved with getting the protester or protesters out have no control whatsoever over immigration policy anyway. And it's extraordinarily hard to imagine that even if you got 5,000 people standing up, if there were room for them, that the negotiators would get in touch with ICE. Like, that's not really the point. I think the point was to send a message. Was a message sent? I don't know. Maybe it was.
Surprised she broke so quickly, though. Only 3 hours. She went from
Do you know how hot it was?
I'm not going to leave until all the families are reunited, to actually apologizing to some of them for having to come up and get her. That's pretty quick.
It was 95 degrees, and it felt like 105 degrees in New York City over the 4th of July holiday. So I'm actually not surprised that I wouldn't have lasted 3 hours. I can tell you that for sure. Susan Collins, who is widely regarded as one of the more reasonable or moderate voices in the Senate among the Republicans, says that she would not support a nominee to replace Anthony Kennedy who would overturn Roe v. Wade. I think it is lovely that she is saying that, and I think it is absolutely political bullshit that she is saying it. And the reason why is we know how the hearings go. No Supreme Court justices ever answer the question, would you support overturning Roe v. Wade? We know this. During the confirmation hearings, they are always asked, the nominees are always asked about Roe v. Wade. It is a sort of litmus test type question. It has become a standard question that everybody gets asked. And the candidates always say the exact same thing. I would go into I would go into all cases that come before the court with an open mind, and I would adjudicate on the merits of the case, taking into consideration all relevant case law and precedent, but it would be inappropriate of me to even speculate as to how I would rule on an issue that may someday come before the court. So I get that she's saying she won't support someone who says that they would potentially overturn Roe v. Wade. No one is going to go up there and say that they would potentially overturn Roe v. Wade, unless there is going to be just a drastic change as to how these confirmation hearings go.
Well, maybe Susan Collins could look into the track record of the nominee.
Right.
You know, maybe they were a justice at some lower court or a state court, and they voted one way or another on abortion restriction,
Sure.
and, you know, access to abortion, that sort of thing. And if she notices that trend, she would be inclined to vote no for their confirmation.
That's the one way that she might be able to deduce that, but it's not going to come from the content of the confirmation hearings. I think we can say with 99.9% certainty. So then the question becomes, is this just her posturing politically in front of or for the benefit of Maine voters who are understandably more moderate? Even the Republicans are more moderate. That's why they've elected Susan Collins. So that when she eventually does support whoever the nominee is, she can say, they didn't say during the confirmation hearings that they would overturn Roe v. Wade. If they had, I wouldn't have voted for them, but they never actually said that. I think it might be more political posturing than anything else.
Okay, so you need 51 votes to confirm the justice, right, to the Supreme Court, because Mitch McConnell changed the rules. If Susan Collins votes no and all the Democrats, you know, stay the course and they join along her with her, it'll be 50-50. Mike Pence would be the deciding vote. But John McCain is often hospitalized. He's undergoing, you know, cancer treatment. So maybe he would be unavailable to vote. And Democrats could maybe hold out at least until the midterm elections. They take back the Senate.
Did you read about what they're doing to solve that problem?
What?
They are looking at having him relinquish his seat just late enough so that it would not be up in November. And it's been offered to his wife, Cindy McCain.
Wow.
And that would be a way. And it's specifically because of the issue you're bringing up that they would want to ensure that they can get a conservative justice on the court.
That's upsetting, yeah. And they may not even have to get there because 3 Democrats in the Senate voted for Neil Gorsuch.
Right.
Including our friend Joe Manchin.
Yep. So we will see what ultimately happens with that. So what'd you do for the break? I know you had way more traveling than I had.
Oh, I did a lot of stuff. I went to Chicago. I went to Milwaukee. I had jam-packed days each and every day.
Yep.
Let's see, I went to Summerfest, which is the world's largest music festival in Milwaukee.
What were some of like the key bands that you saw?
Third Eye Blind.
Oh, nice.
Florida Georgia Line.
Yep. That's horrible.
Yeah, and some like jazz type bands, all different types of music.
Let me ask
very
you this.
hot there though.
Did Third Eye Blind sing How's It Going to Be?
Yeah, yeah, of course.
Well, because when I saw Third Eye Blind, they didn't. And they didn't sing it during their normal set. And then there was an encore. And they did one song, and it wasn't How's It Going to Be. And they were starting a second song, and everybody's assuming it's going to be How's It Going to Be.
Yeah.
And they didn't do it. And they just didn't play. Everybody wants to hear the hits. They did Semi-Charmed Life. They
Right.
did Jumper. They did, you know, almost all the hits. No How's It Going to Be. And a lot of people disappointed with that in the show I went to.
You gotta play all the hits. No
I know.
one cares about your songs that no one's ever heard before. And part of their act, I was actually swimming in Lake Michigan. Quite an experience if you ever get the chance to do that.
Yeah, I don't really swim in lakes usually.
Right.
I don't know. I just don't. It's not that I'm against it in principle. I just rarely am around lakes. Now, Florida Georgia Line is country, right?
Right. It's like country rock, that new age country stuff.
Do you like that?
No.
You don't? Okay, very good.
You know, it was a whole day of music, right?
Yeah.
You're gonna like some, you're gonna not like others.
And any other top bands?
Oh no, that was it.
That was it. Okay. All right. And then how about Chicago? You had been to Chicago before?
Been to Chicago before. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, the rest of the weekend included going to baseball games. I went to a Cubs game. I went to a Brewers game. I went to another concert to a band I've never seen before, but my friends liked.
What band was that?
Breweries, Snarky Puppy.
Never heard of it.
Yeah, it's like a new fusion jazz type band.
Oh, wow. I'm familiar with Bad Bunny, but not Snarky Puppy. No, I'm serious. That's a real band.
Yeah. Oh, is it really?
Bad Bunny, yeah.
I know there's like pigeons playing ping pong too.
Yeah.
Another one in that same genre.
Never heard about that one.
Did a brewery tour in Milwaukee.
Yep.
Great trip.
Was the brewery tour because Milwaukee has both like the big corporate breweries,
Yeah,
but
like
also
Miller
cool
Lite.
microbreweries?
Yeah, it was always a microbrewery.
Microbrewery. Okay.
Lakefront Brewery wasn't the best beer though. I
No.
gotta say. I mean, you got a great deal for like $10. You get 4 small drinks, a big drink at the end, a whole tour, and if you got like a redemption code thing to go to another nearby bar and get a free drink there. So
Wow.
totally worth it. Big advertisement for them too.
So it's like 6 drinks for $10, basically.
Yeah.
And a tour.
and an experience.
Was it air conditioned?
It was.
Okay, that's good. Okay, good. And any flight issues at all or smooth flights?
I got delayed on the way there. But
Oh.
the horrible thing about it was I was delayed while sitting on the plane. They
Oh, that's
boarded
the worst.
everyone, and then they were saying that they were having an issue getting the fuel onto the plane. So we were just sitting there for an hour. And I picked the most inopportune times to go to the bathroom. And eventually I just defied the rules of the plane and went while the seatbelt sign was still turned on.
Right.
And actually had a little bit of an argument with one of the flight attendants.
During the climb?
Yeah, it happened.
Okay.
Nearly got the plane turned around.
I can't believe that's true.
Well, not that part. No.
So I was in New York City for a wedding, and I was actually tentatively going to be having a dinner with Anthony Fantano, huge music YouTuber Anthony Fantano, en route to the wedding. But because of a combination of some other 4th of July events getting moved around, I had to cancel, and I felt really bad because we made plans. My girlfriend and I were going to have dinner with him, and I don't even know how much he says about his personal life on his channel, so I won't give away any other details he may not give. But anyway, with him and his team, I will say. And it got canceled, which was sad because we've never met in person, and I was looking forward to that. Went to this wedding in New York City. It was so insanely hot at the Jewish Community Center where the wedding took place that I started feeling unwell, and I had to sit down and start chugging copious amounts of water. And then I was able to recover. There was some great glatt kosher catering for the event. It wasn't even a religious wedding, but it was at a Jewish community center. And I think one of the rules they impose is you have to have kosher catering.
Yeah, so are they not allowed to have air conditioning? Or
No,
do they just
there
not
was
have
air
it?
conditioning.
It was still hot?
It was 100 degrees out. Yeah, it was just still not. The air conditioning got it down to like 78 in the room, but with hundreds of people in the room, it's hot. It feels really, really hot. And then after that, I wanted to go back to my old neighborhood in Brooklyn, and I did. I was expecting to walk around, go to Brooklyn Bridge Park, and do all this different stuff. It was so hot that I ended up just going out to eat, to dinner, to a couple spots that I like. We ended up, my girlfriend and I, just ducking into new bars that are new from when we lived there, that had air conditioning when the World Cup games were on, to just watch the World Cup games in air-conditioned bliss, because it was just so insanely hot. And even taking the subway was horrible. The subway cars are beautifully air-conditioned, but the stations are not. And it was just absolutely miserable, but good time overall.
Yeah, that stuff gets dangerous. You don't want to get heat stroke, especially if you're drinking and walking around a whole bunch. Careful with that.
Got to be real careful. So yeah, not much else. The one thing I don't know why I care about this, but I love making good time when I drive places. So I always am trying to calculate when should I leave. I hate traffic. And I was convinced because I read that July 3rd afternoon was going to be the worst time to be driving out of northeastern cities like Boston and New York. And our plan was to leave New York City at about 11 a.m. on the 3rd. And I was sure, and we were going back to Western Mass to see our families, I was convinced that instead of being the normal 2 hour and 50-minute, 3-hour drive, it was going to be 4 hours, 4.5 hours, 5 hours. No traffic whatsoever. That's seems awesome. That we just beat traffic by a couple of hours, and I absolutely loved it.
Yeah. I mean, you could still be stuck in traffic right now, not be able to come back in time to make the show today.
The thing I really miss about New York City, and you get acclimated so I remember when I left New York City and I was visiting Boston, my feeling was always, New York City is more progressive in the way that Bernie Sanders is progressive. Boston is more democratic in the way that the Kennedys are Democrats, right? It's a very different feel.
Incrementalism as opposed to ideology, right?
It's more the old money, we're Democrats thing in Boston versus the new money, hipsterized, progressive social democrats in New York City. And when I moved to Boston, I just became accustomed to it, right? It's bros everywhere. It's like the Irish, Italian, Catholic culture. There's nary a Jew in sight with the exception of a few neighborhoods, right? Like Brookline and Newton, et cetera. Just a totally different feel. But I had become accustomed to it from being in Boston. The second I got back to Brooklyn, I realized immediately, oh yeah, I love the culture so much more here than I do in a lot of parts of Boston. So I became reacclimated very quickly to the New York City culture, and I do love it.
Yeah, I mean, as someone who's lived in Boston for pretty much my entire life, I thought that the Italian, Irish bro culture was just how it is everywhere.
No.
And apparently it's not.
No. In New York City, it really is the exception in a lot of neighborhoods. It does exist in some places, more working class places. And Staten Island is of the 5 boroughs, the most conservative. I've only been there 5 minutes. The entire 2.5 years I lived in New York City, I literally spent 5 minutes in Staten Island. It was the 5 minutes between the ferry to Staten Island and the departure of the ferry back from Staten Island.
It is free.
It is free, which is why I did it for the view, yeah. All right, so anyway, that was my trip. That was Pat's trip, and we're also off the next 2 weeks, so we'll have lots of stories for you. I'm kidding. We're here for a while. We're here for a while now. Some people angry that we actually they jokingly said, we took a 5-day weekend for the 4th of July. But as you know, Pat, vacation time is important, so we did it. But we're back, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.